all, this is my hope is in him, and one of my missions on YouTube is to get people to follow their logic through to its logical conclusion. Many people use specific logic to try and interpret biblical passages, but often they just use that logic for that passage and do not follow it through in its entirety. In this video, I would like to discuss Matthew 24 and the logic people use to determine who it was written to, for, and about. Please watch this clip by Grant Jeffrey, and I'll see you after.
But when we look at Scripture, we find there's another event that is often quoted by teachers and pastors, and this event sometimes sounds like the rapture. But let me assure you, it's not. It's found in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus has been giving all of the signs to his Jewish disciples of what it's going to be like at the second coming. Now remember, put this in context. There has been no church created at the time Jesus is speaking. There's not a Christian on the face of the planet, not even the disciples. They are Jewish followers of the coming Messiah. So we must, to understand a conversation, understand the context. What would Jesus have been talking about? Certainly he can't be talking about the church, because the church hasn't even been created, and he hasn't even told us about the church, because he hasn't even been crucified yet.
Did you catch what he said? Let me repeat it. Now remember, put this in context. There has been no church created at the time Jesus is speaking. There is not a Christian on the face of this planet, not even the disciples. They are Jewish followers of the coming Messiah. So we must understand the conversation, understand the context. What would Jesus have been talking about? Certainly, he can't be talking about the church, for the church hasn't even been created, and he hasn't even told us about the church, because he hasn't even been crucified yet. Grant believed that Matthew 24 couldn't have been talking about the church, nor could Jesus have been talking to the church in this passage, because he says the church hasn't been created yet. So it was only referencing the Jewish followers of the Messiah. Many pre-trib prophecy teachers and students of prophecy adhere to this logic. Now the logic appears fine on the surface, but let's see what happens when we dig a little deeper. Let's follow the logic through to its logical conclusion. Do you realize the impact this statement has on the Gospels? I don't think you realize that this statement opens up a huge can of worms. Think about it for a moment. They say Jesus wasn't talking to or about the church because it hadn't been created yet. Ponder that carefully. Do you realize that a statement like that cannot just be applied to Matthew 24? If you state that about Matthew 24, then you have to carry that logic through to every single thing that Jesus ever said before he died on the cross, including, but not limited to, the following verse. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Jesus was again talking with the disciples, but every prophecy teacher I know loves to quote this verse to share how Jesus will take us to be with him where he is, in the rapture. They quote it as a promise of God for the church. But think about what they said regarding Matthew 24, how it couldn't have been speaking to or about the church since the church didn't exist. So, my friends, would you say that John 14 was only speaking to the Jewish followers too? That this promise was only for the Jewish followers and not the church? That he couldn't possibly have been speaking about or to the church since the church didn't exist as Christ hadn't died yet? Do you see now why you cannot use that logic to interpret Matthew 24 as being for the Jewish followers only? Do you see how once you follow the logic through, you realize exactly how illogical it really is? Would you really believe that nothing Jesus said was for you, the church, because you never existed at the time he was speaking? I didn't think so. Follow the logic. You might be surprised where you end up. God bless.